Hey, old man, you need to get out now. That's how it started, not a hello, not a question. Just a command dripping with arrogance. I cracked one eye open, still floating in my pool, and saw him, 17 maybe, wearing sneakers worth more than my truck's tires. He stood there at the edge of my property, arms crossed like he was some kind of authority figure. "This is HOA property," he said. "My mom runs this neighborhood. So unless you want trouble, I'd suggest you leave." I stared at him for a long second, then let out a slow, amused laugh. Not the polite kind, the you have no idea who you're talking to kind, because he didn't. And if he did, he'd already be running. That moment right there was the spark. The second a spoiled teenager tried to throw his weight around and ended up picking a fight with the wrong man. You're watching Tomato Tales, where real stories about arrogance, karma, and poetic justice come to life. And trust me, this one, it's a masterpiece in payback. Before I tell you how that little showdown escalated into an HOA-sized disaster, answer me this. Have you ever met someone who thought they were untouchable? A boss, a neighbor, maybe even a classmate? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if you love watching entitled people finally meet reality, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell, because you're about to see karma work overtime. Now, let's roll back 6 months. That's when I moved into Willowbrook Estates, a place that looked like the American dream, but ran like a monarchy. And its queen, Karen Mitchell, HOA president, neighborhood tyrant, master of fake smiles. She showed up at my door 3 days after I moved in, muffins in hand, attitude fully loaded. "Welcome to Willowbrook," she sang. "Just wanted to make sure you got your HOA packet." Oh, I got it. 47 pages of "Don't breathe wrong or you'll be fined." Then came the warning, wrapped in sweetness. "I noticed your moving truck blocked the Hendersons' driveway yesterday. We take parking very seriously here." That was my introduction to the queen. Smiling teeth, sharp claws, I nodded, smiled back. "Thanks for letting me know." But I could already tell this woman wasn't interested in harmony. She was addicted to control. What she didn't know, though, was that I'd been trained my whole career to spot people like her and to handle them, because when you deal with real power every day, you recognize fake power instantly. And soon, Karen Mitchell and her son would learn exactly what real authority looks like. She thought she ruled the neighborhood. Her son thought he could order me around. Neither of them knew they'd just started a war they couldn't win. Hit subscribe, because The Mask, and shows you how one HOA queen turned a whole community into her personal kingdom. Until I showed up. If you've ever lived in a neighborhood with an HOA, you already know. There's always that one person who treats the rulebook like holy scripture. At Willowbrook Estates, that person was Karen Mitchell. She didn't just run the HOA. She was the HOA. Every letter, every fine, every passive-aggressive reminder, all carried her signature touch of superiority. People didn't even mow their lawns without wondering if Karen was watching. The first week, I noticed something weird. When Karen walked her little lapdog through the neighborhood, conversations just stopped. Curtains twitched. Neighbors suddenly remembered urgent errands. Everyone smiled at her, sure, but the smiles looked more like fear than friendliness. She wasn't the friendly suburban mom she pretended to be. She was running that community like a private kingdom. I remember the first time she tried testing me. It was barely my second week there when I found a folded notice taped to my door. "Your grass exceeds the approved length by a 1/4 inch. Please comply within 24 hours. A 1/4 inch. My lawn looked like something off a golf course, but sure. Let's call in the National Guard. I trimmed it anyway. No sense giving her ammunition so early. But something told me this wasn't going to stop. A few days later, I finally met her son, the same kid who'd tried to kick me out of my own pool. Brandon Mitchell, 17 years old, spoiled rotten, and driving a BMW his parents had bought him for keeping a C average. I met him the way most of the neighborhood had, at 2 a.m., when his subwoofers were shaking windows like an earthquake. I walked over, knocked politely on his door. He opened it, grinning, phone in hand, music blaring. "Yo, what's up?" "Hey, Brandon," I said calmly. "Mind turning the volume down a bit? It's a work night." He looked me up and down and smirked. "Relax, dude. It's not even that late. My mom runs this place. We can do what we want," that line. "We can do what we want." I'd end up hearing it a lot. He slammed the door in my face, music still blasting. And that was when it hit me. These two didn't just bend the rules. They were the rules. Karen had spent 3 years stacking the HOA board with people who owed her favors, or were too scared to cross her. She'd built a mini empire out of fear and paperwork. Need proof? Ask poor Mrs. Patterson down the street. She'd lived there 15 years without a problem, until Karen fined her $200 for having unapproved garden gnomes. Section 14.3 of the HOA bylaws. Apparently, when Mrs. Patterson protested, Karen threatened daily inspections until she found more violations. And she did. Then there were the Johnsons, a young couple with a newborn baby. Karen fined them $500 because their old Honda was parked 3 inches over the white line in their driveway. 3 inches, guess who measured it herself? Yep, Karen Mitchell. Meanwhile, Brandon parked his BMW sideways across 2 spaces every day, threw parties until sunrise, and borrowed people's tools without asking, returning them broken, if at all. But when anyone complained, Karen swooped in like a designer-clad dragon. "Stop harassing my family," she'd say, "or I'll see you in court." People stopped fighting back. Stopped talking. Stopped living. That's when I realized this wasn't just an annoying HOA anymore. This was a full-on power structure, and Karen and her son sat at the top of it. But what they didn't know was that I'd been watching quietly. Recording, documenting, learning their patterns. Because sooner or later every bully crosses the line, and when they did, I'd be ready to push back. Hard. Karen Mitchell thought fear was power. Her son thought chaos was fun. They were about to find out what happens when someone they can't intimidate finally stands up. Don't miss when things start cracking. The first confrontation that turns this quiet neighborhood into a battleground. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay tuned. You'll want front row seats for what happens next. After a few months in Willowbrook, I started noticing something. This wasn't a neighborhood anymore. It was a prison, and Karen Mitchell was the warden. You could almost feel the tension in the air, like people were walking on eggshells made of HOA paper. Mrs. Patterson stopped gardening. The Johnsons barely came outside. And every time Karen's SUV rolled down the street, blinds snapped shut like dominoes. She ran the HOA like a monarchy. And her son, Brandon, was the spoiled prince, the kind who thought consequences were just for other people. The first real problem came one Tuesday night. It was 2:03 a.m. I remember because the bass from his music was rattling my window frames. I threw on a hoodie, went next door, and knocked. Brandon opened the door, eyes half open, phone in one hand, red cup in the other. "What?" "Mind turning it down a bit," I said. "People are trying to sleep." He grinned, and that smirk I was starting to hate. "Relax, man. It's not even late. Besides, Mom says we can do whatever we want." There it was again, the phrase. His family motto, I could have argued. But I didn't. Instead, I went back home, turned on my security camera feed, and hit record, because I knew better than to fight arrogance with anger. You fight it with proof. And I was just getting started. Over the next few weeks, I saw the full scope of Karen's little empire. Letters left on doorsteps. Neighbors being fined for nonsense like unapproved mailbox paint or non-compliant. Wind chimes.1. Couple got fined for having their Halloween decorations up too long. Another got cited because their Christmas lights weren't down by January 2nd. Meanwhile, Brandon threw another party every weekend, blasting music until dawn, leaving beer cans scattered across lawns. Nobody said a word. Not one person dared. I saw Mrs. Patterson one afternoon, standing by her mailbox, clutching a letter with tears in her eyes. "Another fine?" I asked gently. She nodded. "For the gnomes again." I looked at her yard, spotless, trimmed, peaceful. "Those same gnomes have been there since before half these houses existed," I said. She gave a weak smile. "Doesn't matter. Karen doesn't like them." And just like that, I realized something chilling. This wasn't incompetence. It was control through fear. People didn't follow the rules because they respected them. They followed them because they were scared of what would happen if they didn't. And Brandon, he was watching and learning. Every arrogant smirk, every cruel word, every time his mom got away with bullying someone. He soaked it all in like gasoline waiting for a spark. One morning, I came outside to find my truck had a bright orange warning sticker slapped on it. "Commercial vehicles prohibited." My truck wasn't commercial. It was my personal vehicle used for work. But that didn't matter to Karen. When I confronted her about it, she smiled that same artificial smile she'd worn since day one. "Rules are rules," she said. "We all have to follow them." I looked her dead in the eye. "Then maybe you should start with your son." Her smile faltered just for a second. Then she tilted her head. "Careful. Talking to me like that can be considered harassment under HOA code." That's when I knew this wasn't going to end quietly. So, I started collecting. Photos, videos, notes, dates, times, not just of my run-ins, but of everyone's. Because someday, when the time was right, I was going to pull the rug right out from under her empire. But before that day came, things got worse. A lot worse. Brandon wasn't just a nuisance anymore. He was about to make a move that crossed every line there was. It was supposed to be another quiet Saturday. I just finished mowing, grabbed a cold drink, and sat back by the pool to finally enjoy a few minutes of peace. Then I heard his voice again. "Hey, old man. That chair's for residents only." I turned my head slowly, and there he was. Brandon Mitchell, standing at the gate to my backyard. Smirk plastered across his face like he'd rehearsed it. Except this time, he wasn't just mouthing off from the sidewalk. He'd actually let himself in. "Careful," I said evenly. "You're trespassing," he laughed. "Relax, dude. This whole place is HOA property. I can hang wherever I want." He dropped his towel onto one of my chairs like he owned it, and kicked off his shoes. That was it. The moment I realized the kid wasn't just entitled. He was testing boundaries. I stood up, calm but firm. "You've got 5 seconds to walk back through that gate before I call the sheriff." He grinned wider. "Go ahead. My mom is the HOA. You really think anyone's gonna side with you?" And right there, under the afternoon sun, something in the air shifted. He wasn't just some brat anymore. He was an extension of his mother's control. And he thought it made him untouchable. What he didn't know was that I'd already set up cameras. High definition, multiple angles, audio included. Everything he did that day was being recorded. He splashed water toward me, laughing. "Man, chill out." "You're so uptight." I didn't flinch. Just said, "You done?" He shrugged, grabbed his towel, and left, but not before spitting into my pool. Real classy, I didn't yell. I didn't chase him. I simply noted the time, 2:41 p.m., and saved the footage, because in my world, patience isn't weakness. It's strategy. The next morning, a bright yellow citation was taped to my door. Unauthorized pool furniture. Unapproved design. Brandon's chair. The same one he'd used the day before. That was the moment I knew this was no coincidence. Karen and Brandon were working together. She was using the HOA to harass me, and he was her messenger boy. So I did what I do best. I started digging. I pulled HOA meeting notes, cross-checked fines, matched signatures, And something started to stand out. Karen's violations always targeted the same people. Anyone who disagreed with her. Anyone who questioned her son. Anyone who dared to say no. And now I was officially on her list. But here's the twist. Karen had no idea who she'd just picked a fight with. Because that quiet neighbor in public service? He wasn't just a regular resident. He was someone with a badge, a camera, and the law on his side. Stick around, the truth starts leaking. HOA secrets, fake fines, and one phone call that flips the entire neighborhood against their queen. Hit subscribe and ring the bell right now, because the best part of this story is just getting started. The next week, everything changed. Karen's control had always been airtight. Every complaint silenced, every neighbor too afraid to speak. But that was before Brandon made a mistake he couldn't bury. It started small. He and a few friends thought it'd be funny to record a prank video, tossing eggs at houses, and spray painting harmless words on driveways. They uploaded it to social media, bragging, laughing, and tagging Willowbrook Estates. By sunrise, the video had gone viral. Locally, at least. Every homeowner in the neighborhood woke up to see Karen's precious model community trending for all the wrong reasons. Guess whose BMW plate was in every frame? I didn't have to lift a finger. The neighborhood chat exploded. People were furious, not just about the prank, but about the months of silence and fear. Mrs. Patterson posted, "Funny how my garden gnomes are a violation. But vandalism's fine if your mom runs the HOA." Others followed. Screenshots of fake fines, stories about intimidation, photos of Brandon's late-night parties. For the first time, people weren't whispering. They were talking out loud. Karen tried damage control, of course. She stormed into the chat like a politician caught mid-scandal. "These claims are exaggerated," she wrote. "I'll handle this internally." But it was too late. The control she'd built for years, through fear and fake authority, was starting to crumble. That's when I made my move. I sent an anonymous email to every homeowner, attaching a folder of HOA activity logs I'd compiled. Time-stamped videos, audio clips, scanned notices, everything. Brandon trespassing, Karen issuing illegal fines, her voice on a recording saying, "They won't do anything. They're all scared." The reaction? Immediate, explosive. By sunset, Karen's phone must have been melting. 3 board members resigned. 2 homeowners threatened legal action. And Brandon? He'd gone radio silent. The next day, I saw her SUV crawl past my house at half speed. She didn't wave this time, just glared. That tight-lipped, corner-of-the-eye glare people give when they realize they've lost control. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Because the truth was finally out. And once truth spreads, it's unstoppable. It doesn't shout. It echoes, but I knew Karen wasn't the type to surrender quietly. And I was right. That night, as I sat reviewing footage on my laptop, my motion sensor alert pinged. Camera 3, the side gate. A shadow moved across the lens, slow, careful. Someone was on my property again. Was it Brandon? Was it Karen? Or had their little empire just gotten desperate enough to cross the line again? You'll find out the confrontation turns real. And for the first time, the sheriff gets involved. Hit subscribe, tap that bell, and don't blink. Because the real storm in Willowbrook is about to begin. The motion sensor went off again. Camera 3, side gate. I froze. The house was quiet, just the faint hum of the pool filter outside. I switched the monitor view. There it was. A shadow creeping along the fence line. Slow, deliberate. For a second, I thought it was an animal. Then the figure stepped into the light, and the camera caught his face. Brandon Mitchell. He was wearing a hoodie, face half hidden, and holding something metallic. I zoomed in. It was a can of spray paint. He was tagging my fence. I grabbed my phone, started recording from inside the live feed, then slipped out the back door as quietly as I could. My boots barely made a sound on the grass, He was laughing under his breath, shaking the can. "Yeah, who's the boss now, old man?" The second he turned toward the pool, I flicked on the floodlights. "He froze like a deer in headlights. Caught you," I said. He dropped the can and tried to bolt, but I was already there. "Easy, Brandon." He stopped, eyes wide. "You can't touch me." "Mom doesn't control county law," I interrupted. "You're trespassing and vandalizing private property. That's a crime." He looked genuinely stunned, like nobody had ever said the word crime to him before. Before he could reply, red and blue lights washed over the yard. I hadn't called them just now. I'd called them 5 minutes earlier when the sensor first went off. Old habits die hard. 2 deputies stepped through the gate. "Everything all right, sir?" one asked. "Yeah," I said, motioning toward Brandon. "Caught this one in the act." Brandon started to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. "This is HOA property. You can't—" One deputy cut him off. "Son, you're underage and trespassing on private land. Let's go talk to your mom." And that's when Karen appeared, bathrobe, slippers, fury radiating from her like a storm cloud. "Officer, there must be some mistake," she said, flashing that fake smile. "This is a misunderstanding." The deputy held up the spray can. "Misunderstanding looks a lot like vandalism, ma'am." Karen's smile faltered for the first time since I'd met her. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. "You think you're clever, don't you?" I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Because while she was talking, one of the deputies was already checking my camera feed. The footage I'd emailed them 10 minutes before they arrived. "Every frame crystal clear. Every second time-stamped. Looks like we've got enough to file a report," one deputy said. "We'll take it from here." Karen's face drained of color. Brandon shouted, "Mom, do something!" But for once she couldn't. She turned to me. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." I smiled just slightly. "Actually, ma'am, I think it's you who doesn't." Because that night, when the flashing lights faded and the Mitchells went home in silence, something else finally came to light. The truth about who I really was. And when the neighborhood found out, Karen's empire didn't just crack, it collapsed. Stick around, I reveal everything. My job, the investigation, and how the so-called Queen of Willowbrook ended up dethroned by her own rules. Hit subscribe, tap that bell, and trust me, this story's about to hit its peak. Word spreads fast in small neighborhoods. By morning, everyone in Willowbrook knew about the late-night incident. But what they didn't know, at least not yet, was who I really was. See, I'd kept that quiet since the day I moved in. Told people I worked in public service, and technically true, but not the full picture. I wasn't just another neighbor. I was Sheriff Daniel Cross, head of county investigations. And Karen Mitchell? She just picked a fight with the wrong man. That morning, I woke to find 3 HOA board members standing awkwardly at my doorstep, clutching coffee cups and avoiding eye contact. "Morning," I said. They exchanged looks before the oldest cleared his throat. "We heard about what happened, and Karen told us not to contact you." I smiled slightly. "And yet here you are." He nodded. "Yeah, because she's been running this place like her own business. And we're tired of it." That was the crack I'd been waiting for. I invited them in, opened my laptop, and showed them the evidence I'd collected. Illegal fines, misuse of HOA funds, altered minutes from board meetings, even recordings of Karen admitting to fabricating citations. They were stunned. "She's been forging signatures?" one of them whispered. "Multiple," I said, "and filing them under residents who moved years ago." By noon they'd all agreed. It was time to take action. I didn't even have to push. They drafted an emergency motion to suspend Karen pending investigation. When she found out, she showed up at my door again. Same fake smile, but this time her voice trembled. "You think you can just embarrass me? You'll regret this." I stepped outside, calm as ever. "Karen, I told you before, rules apply to everyone. Even you," she laughed, a brittle sound. "You don't scare me." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my badge. Good, I said softly, because this isn't about fear. It's about accountability. Her face went pale. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. The next HOA meeting was a circus. Every resident showed up, people who hadn't attended in years. Karen tried to talk her way out of it, but I'd already handed everything to the county board. Misuse of funds, falsified fines, intimidation, all backed by video, audio, and witness statements. When they read out the list of violations, her voice cracked. "You can't do this to me," she shouted. The new board chair, one of the men who'd come to my house, looked her straight in the eye and said, "No, Karen, you did this to yourself." The room went quiet. You could almost feel years of tension melt off people's shoulders. For the first time, Willowbrook Estates wasn't under her thumb. And Brandon? He couldn't even look at anyone. Word was the county was pressing juvenile charges, vandalism, trespassing, property damage. I didn't celebrate, didn't gloat, because that's not what this was about. It was about setting things right and reminding people that power without integrity isn't leadership, it's tyranny. But just when it looked like peace had finally returned to Willowbrook, something unexpected happened. Karen wasn't done. And her next move, let's just say, it made everything that came before look tame. You'd think that after everything, the exposure, the suspension, the public humiliation, Karen Mitchell would have laid low. But nope, Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat. She was the kind who'd rather burn everything down than admit she'd lost control. It started with whispers, subtle little rumors floating through the neighborhood. People saying I'd set her up, that I'd edited footage, that the sheriff's department was covering for one of their own. Classic Karen. When you can't win with truth, flood the streets with lies. But this time she went too far. One morning, I got a knock on my door. An officer from my own department holding a sealed envelope. "Sheriff Cross," he said. "We received a formal complaint against you. Anonymous but detailed. Inside were screenshots, printouts, photos, all doctored. Fake timestamps, edited clips. Karen had actually tried to frame me, claiming I'd falsified evidence to get her removed. I couldn't help but chuckle. She'd gone from HOA president to full-blown conspiracy theorist, but I didn't underestimate her. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that desperate people are dangerous. I called in my tech unit, had them analyze every file. Within hours, they found metadata inconsistencies, copy-paste signatures, and AI-edited timestamps. The fakery was laughable, but also criminal. When we traced the anonymous upload back to her laptop's IP address, I knew what I had to do. That evening, I drove down Willowbrook's main road one last time. Neighbors were outside again, walking dogs, chatting, living like the place was finally breathing. But as I turned the corner, there she was, standing in her driveway. She crossed her arms as I parked. "I know what you're doing," she hissed. "You're trying to destroy me." I shook my head. "No, Karen, you did that all by yourself." Then I handed her a folded paper, a formal notice. Criminal investigation opened, forgery, fraud, tampering with evidence. Her face went white. "You can't do this." "I already did," I said quietly. "You crossed the line, Karen. This isn't your little HOA kingdom anymore. This is the law." She didn't say another word, just stood there trembling, while the sound of her perfect suburban empire crumbled around her. Within a week, she was officially removed from the HOA board. A new election was held. The community voted unanimously for change. And for the first time in years, people smiled again without looking over their shoulders. Brandon. He moved out not long after. Word was he got community service hours and sold that BMW to cover the fines. Poetic, really. As for me, I stayed. Because Willowbrook had finally become what it was always meant to be. A neighborhood, not a dictatorship. But you know what the craziest part is? Even after everything, Karen tried to spin the story online, and that backfired worse than anything she ever did. I'll tell you how her comeback turned into a viral disaster that made sure she'd never run another HOA again. Hit subscribe, tap the bell, and get ready, because karma wasn't done with Karen Mitchell just yet. You'd think after being kicked out of the HOA, hit with fraud charges, and completely humiliated in front of her neighbors, Karen Mitchell would finally take the L. But that's not who Karen was. No, she decided if she couldn't control the neighborhood, she'd control the narrative. 2 weeks after her removal, a brand new Facebook page popped up, exposing corruption in Willowbrook Estates. Guess who was running it? Her first post read like a manifesto. She claimed she'd been targeted by a corrupt sheriff, and that innocent families were being silenced. She uploaded cropped screenshots, selective clips, and dramatic paragraphs about abuse of power. At first, nobody cared. But then the local gossip pages picked it up, and suddenly, Karen Mitchell was trending again. Half the town was talking about it. Some believed her, most didn't. And that's when the real fun began. Because for every lie Karen posted, there were dozens of residents ready to set the record straight. People flooded her comments with screenshots, proof, even video clips I'd quietly made public through the county transparency site. Within hours, her own narrative collapsed under the weight of truth. One comment stood out. "You fined me $300 for my mailbox color. Karen, sit this one out." Another, "You forged my husband's signature while he was overseas. Want me to post that letter?" And the best one, "Lady, you got banned from your own HOA. Maybe log off." By the second day, she'd deleted over half her posts. By the third, the page was gone completely. But the internet never forgets. Someone had screen recorded everything, turned it into a short video called "The Queen of Willowbrook: Rise and Fall of an HOA Tyrant." Within a week, it hit 2 million views. Comments poured in, people sharing their own HOA horror stories, tagging Tomato Tales asking, "Is this the same Karen from your story?" Yep, that was her 15 minutes of fame, and the longest 15 minutes of her life. I didn't respond publicly, didn't need to, because the truth had already done the work for me. What amazed me most wasn't the viral chaos. It was how the neighborhood reacted. The people she once controlled with fear were now laughing together. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years were having barbecues, waving across lawns, rebuilding what she'd torn down. And me? I sat on my porch one evening watching the sunset reflect off that once silent cul-de-sac, and thought, maybe, just maybe, this place finally felt like home. But just when it looked like the story was over, it wasn't. Because a few weeks later, something unexpected showed up in my mailbox. Something from Karen herself. And what was inside that envelope? Let's just say, it changed how I looked at her forever. Stick around. The final chapter, where I open Karen's letter and find out the one thing I never expected from her. Hit subscribe, tap the bell, and don't miss the finale, because even the worst villains sometimes have one last twist in their story. A few quiet weeks passed. No more HOA drama, no more warnings taped to doors or angry emails flooding inboxes. Willowbrook finally felt like a neighborhood again. The kind where you wave to your neighbors instead of watching them through blinds. Then, one morning I found an envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name written in sharp cursive handwriting I recognized instantly. Karen Mitchell. I stood there for a second, staring at it, debating whether to even open it. Part of me wanted to toss it straight into the trash. But curiosity, or maybe closure, got the better of me. Inside was a single handwritten letter. No apologies at first, no excuses. Just a line that caught me off guard. You were right. She wrote about how for years she'd felt invisible. How running the HOA made her feel important, needed. She said the power made her forget why she'd moved here in the first place. For peace. For community, for belonging. When my husband left, she continued, this place was the only thing I still controlled. I thought if I ran it perfectly, maybe my life wouldn't feel so broken. For the first time, I saw the person behind the monster. Someone lonely, scared, grasping for control because everything else in her world had fallen apart. She ended the letter with something I never expected. Tell the neighbors I'm sorry. Tell them I finally understand what peace looks like. And it's not control, it's kindness. I sat there on the porch for a long time reading that last line again and again. Because sometimes, even the worst people, like the ones who make your life miserable, aren't born villains. They're just broken humans trying to fill empty spaces the wrong way. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. But a few weeks later, I heard through the grapevine that Karen had moved to another town, quietly without her son, and for once she wasn't trying to lead anything. As for Brandon, he eventually stopped by. He was quieter, humbler, said he got a part-time job and was taking night classes. He didn't apologize directly, but his eyes said enough. Willowbrook thrived after that. The new HOA board worked with the community, not against it. And every summer since, when I sit by my pool, the same pool where it all started, I can't help but think about how quickly pride can drown a person. And how easily peace can surface once it's gone. So, what do you think? Was Karen truly sorry or just trying to ease her guilt? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I read every one of them. If you loved this story of karma, power, and redemption, make sure to subscribe to Tomato Tales and hit that bell, because there's always another tale waiting to be told. And remember, sometimes the loudest people in the neighborhood are the ones hiding the most silence inside.